Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm very pleased to bring back to the stage the actor and the director. Are they here? Yes. So I will bring first the actor, Jeremy Xido, who's mingling. And writer-director, Marais.
Yeah, because they're very, very long.
They're very long credits, okay. So just, I mean, it's a big production, many countries and many producers, so I understand. Many people as well. I wanted to start the conversation by asking about the point of origin, which leads to the creation of the character of Rebecca. But the original starting point is quite extraordinary, but I think it's based on a true story, which is the plane crash, and you took it from there, but I wanted to hear a little bit from you about how you heard about this and how that brought you to that universe and really through the character of Rebecca.
So originally, obviously, Werner Herzog once made a film, a documentary, about a lady, Juliane Köpke, who at the age of 17 survived a plane crash in the Peruvian part of the Amazon rainforest. His documentary is very dry, and he takes her back to the plane crash. I think she was probably my age. But she wrote a book that I read. And there were moments in this book that were very, I don't know, moving somehow. They were quite morbid also. And I just became interested. And then watching interviews with her, she much later said that the rainforest had actually given her life back. And I'd never been to the rainforest and I couldn't imagine that. And I got more interested. And then I started to see if it would be possible to option the rights to her book. And that was very difficult because although she was 17 at the time of the accident, her father had sold the rights and the film had been made. It was an American-Italian co-production made 1973, and I think by American law, when you sell your rights, it's for lifetime, whereas in Europe it's like a shorter period. But in the meantime, it wasn't clear who had the rights anyway. So the agent in Germany for her book wasn't able to sell the rights or allow us to option them. And I had a lawyer sort of look into it, a friend of mine, and she sort of realized that the companies that had had the rights had all gone bankrupt, and literally it was completely nebulous, you know, and she sort of felt like, yeah, you could probably option the rights for an art house film and nobody would know the better for it. So this information arrived back at the agent of Köpke, and she obviously reached out to all the people who, when the book had come out, had been interested to option them. So we all had to go and pitch, and I did go and pitch my version, and I have to say that it's not that I wanted to make her story, but there were sort of elements in her story that had really interested me, and one of them was that she'd become this sort of phenomenon overnight at the time of the accident or the crash, and when she arrived back into sort of civilization, she became famous for no wish or want of her own. And I think literally this sort of defined her life and who she became, and also the relationship to her father. She'd lost her mother in the crash. And people were writing her with these erratic ideas. Even a woman wrote her with sort of some kind of astrological chart saying, you survived this crash because, but all the others didn't. And so it was really irrational. And so I was interested in this aspect of something irrational, also because this accident was literally a creation, partially also man-made. The plane should never have been flying in that area. There were many, many reasons. And anyway, but we didn't get the rights in the end because a Swiss-American producer was prepared to pay much, much more money.
You know the Swiss, they always have more money.
Well, there we go. And then we also have Swiss co-producer.
You have less Swiss.
But then, for some reason, that deal never went through because this Swiss co-producer, Swiss English or American, I don't know, disappeared with whatever, with money from financiers. Probably not this project.
So many other stories.
It's another story.
That
Exactly.
could have come from
I
just
know.
the idea.
And then he was like looked for on Interpol because I think from a whatever. So I don't think that ever went through. And but by that time, because the German co-producers by that time said to me, oh, you never wanted to sort of film her story, so why don't you go to Brazil, for example, and research? And you'll probably come up with something else that you are more interested in, but you're taking like something that interested you. And that's literally what I did. I went on a research trip to Brazil, and I already had in mind the idea of a child that somehow becomes an idea of a miracle, and a father. So with that I went to Brazil and I researched children or tried to meet these young healers. There are many in Brazil. And I went to the Amazon with a German journalist, Thomas Fischermann, on about a 5-week trip, and we went up the Trans-Amazonica, and it really left a huge impact on me. So coming back, it's a while back now, it was more how to keep the complexity that I've felt I encountered there, and try to weave that complexity into the story of this girl and her father. Yeah.
There's so many. We also want to see the making of the making of, or just getting the rights that you didn't get. But there's so many themes and concepts that are coming from the basic story of that child. That
Can you speak a little louder, please?
me or her?
Both.
Okay. The idea of the child that is coming from nowhere, really, that's just like a newborn child, and getting a new family and a new father and a new personality and everything that's created around her also brings the concept of like, who are you if you don't know where you come from? And how do you find yourself? And so that's one part of her identity and one of the true line also for that. That's very interesting to think about. And I was wondering if you can talk about when you were writing our character, at what point where you decided to go also in that direction about who are you?
Well, I guess that's a question I have for myself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was consciously thinking about, of course I was consciously thinking about it. But I think that was the question from the beginning. like who are you? And I think that was one of the ideas when thinking, because on this first trip that I went, I mean, the articles written by this journalist were really about this conflict that was building up, or had built up and escalated really, between an indigenous nation and the neighboring little logging town. And I think one of the things that, because obviously Brazil was missioned by the Catholic Church and whatever, but you have all these evangelical people still missioning, and obviously one of the ideas that I would have had that when you take away, I think one of these thoughts were sort of also coming through the conversations I was having with this journalist, because he'd spent so much time there, and he was saying like the first thing the missionaries do is drive out there. I don't want to call it shaman, it's not, but their spiritual person. You kind of kick them out, and then you introduce the Bible. And so the question again was, if you take away something spiritual that belongs to them and you introduce this, who are they? Then are they still the same? And so this theme was sort of important for me to layer somehow in the narrative. But obviously with Rebecca, it was the central idea, or I had also this idea that, you know, we all have this thing that has defined who we are, this I don't want to say trauma because it always sounds so negative, but I don't know that trauma is always negative. Maybe there's also positive trauma, but it certainly sort of releases an energy to find out what it is that happened to one. And so there was a quote, I'm very bad at quoting it, and I think it may have come from Lacan, like the moment of impact is not when the trauma hits you, but it's in returning to that place that the incident happened, that the trauma manifests itself. And that was this thing, I think, that I started with. And I was thinking, what is it that defines who we are? And it often comes from the parents, I would assume, or family is often like this first place. And so this thought was with Rebecca, you know, when she, like, who is she? Because who she is changed by this introduction of this man in character, obviously, but you know, well, that's a story of its own, because Jeremy only came to us very late in the process of working on the film, that he didn't fully have the time. He just used every minute of it to prepare at the same time.
It's really him.
No, not at all. He doesn't even know. No, but I think that was like a very fundamental thought for me, like, who are you? What is it that defines you? And I think the thing was, for me, it's like she's defined by this moment of impact, and that's going to define who she becomes. But it might not be her, who she really is. Yeah.
Since we started bringing Jeremy in the conversation, now we need to know more. So you came late into the production.
Yeah.
And Pierre
Very
gave you very late. So you shot after everyone else.
Everyone else, yeah, it was all green
wrapped.
screen. Yeah.
I assume you got some script. Some
Yes,
kind?
no. Absolutely, the script is what pulled me in. The script and the characters.
Okay, and you were shooting. Everything is shot on location there, right?
Yeah. Well, they were about to shoot when I got the call.
What sort of direction did Pia give you in terms of the creation of your character? The role that you have is sort of a good man, bad man, preacher, that's a family man, but with complex motive. You never really know, or true. He believes, but sometimes you kind of doubt how much he really believes, and the face is projecting.
Yeah.
So it's a complex character that's very, very interesting, and it's a great portrayal. And I was wondering if she gave you direct indication or point of reference, and how much came into like to you while you were working, because you had no preparation time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think one of the things that Pia was really clear about and insistent about is that the love between father and daughter is real.
This is something we do not doubt.
Yeah.
The love is definitely.
And then it's
The
successful.
rest, that's when you see the morality shifting.
Well, and for me, that's where all of the complexity comes, right? It started for me with getting the script, and immediately it was very clear that there are various masks that are and that there's a performative aspect to the character just by being a performer, right? Being a preacher who gets up in front of folks and performs, but and that at the core is this relationship of need, right? There's sort of almost two orphans, right, that find each other with an asymmetric power structure, right, where I then impose a condition was imposed upon me, right, upon Byrne, that suddenly he's considered to be the world makes him the father of this daughter that is not his, but he also has nothing else, right, and in that regards, this relationship saves him in a very imperfect way and in a completely unsustainable way. But the love, it's the only thing that at the core exists. All of the decisions around it, I think, are these conflicts of being constantly self-serving, while appearing to be doing things for others, right? And that's sort of the tragic sort of flaw in this particular character. But the thing that Pia constantly brought us back to, I mean, we spent, I arrived to Brazil and we spent the days that we had going through the script, scene by scene, and even rewriting little moments and trying to kind of flesh out sort of these things. But a lot of that contradiction was built into the story itself. And Pia was very clear as we were working on looking for what was authentic and in this relationship. And then part of my task was where do I fail the love relationship and then have to come back and try to repair it with the unfortunate condition that in doing that I may destroy the one thing that has saved me, right? And so that conflict was always in play in every moment, in every scene, and sort of looking for where there's one face and then turn to something that's real but having to cover it, and something that's abusive but that's loving, and there's a constant bouncing back and forth between that experience and those emotions and those needs. And the other thing is, I arrived and Helena and I, we had this long dinner to meet each other, and then we were going to shoot the next. I don't know if we shot the next day or 2 days later.
3 days later.
3 days later. Didn't know each other, right? She was very, very suspicious about me. She was like, "Who are you? What have you done? Why are you here? What is this?" And I felt it immediately, and I was like, "Oh, you're a teenager." And we had like a 4-hour dinner where we started talking. I mean, we went straight to talking about mortality and the losses in our lives and things that we're really afraid of. And it was a very, very profound conversation with interestingly enough, with a saxophone player in the corner in the restaurant behind us. So there was a soundtrack to it. But I think that foundational, I think that her openness, and I think also the fact that there was so little time, that we had to throw ourselves into this relationship. And so there was this abandon, which was not unlike perhaps the script of these two characters who are suddenly thrown together, are pushed together, and that there's a kind of the world gives you a certain role and power, and it feels off, but it's the only other person that's lost everything in their lives. that's around you, and you hold on to that person, and then you suddenly build a world around that that's faulty, that's unsustainable, that will collapse and is always at risk of collapsing, and you sort of ride that relationship through each and every one of the scenes.
No, I mean, and you feel the pain and the questioning about what's going to happen to both of them. Yet I felt more reassured for Rebecca's future because the trauma was certainly bigger, but she had so many other things she wanted to explore. And I think when she starts really thinking about the land she's in and where the land is coming from and where she's taking from, and to see the injustice, the unfairness that's coming around, and that her father, not father, seems okay with accepting the immorality of everything. But also when she shifts, like she's like, well, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
And I will lose my face. And do I have face? And
Yeah.
who am I?
Well, and I think that the other side of it is that I mean, she's a teenager and she's liberating herself, from the parent, from this and garnering her own power, right? And that power eventually is the thing that then begins to teach Byrne, but it begins to teach me, and actually offers me, I always see sort of the end when she claims me as her, she's the one who claims me as her relative, as opposed to being sort of forced in. She has a volition that she hasn't had throughout the entire film, or that she's struggling with, and that and I've lost everything, and I have to accept her conditions. And so suddenly she becomes the teacher and opens the possibility to dealing with the actual world that's around, as opposed to creating this fiction of a world that has been the thing that has sustained me imperfectly up until she was 16 years old. So yeah, she becomes the teacher by the end.
Everything else that's in the film is also, there's so much that you think about so many other things, because this story is one on its own, and it's exacerbated by the location and the history, the settlement, and the taking of the land. It's something that has been discussed in many other films, and including in the festival, where we had movies about, like the death of democracy in Brazil and the evangelists, and the point of religion that is not going where you think religion should be, which is helping people in need and being fair. And you see a dark reflection of this, where God is not on the side of the people he should be. And that's also something that's very strong in the film. And while you're watching it, you have all this strange emotion about the unfairness and how we can move on from that.
Mm-hmm. Is it a question? No.
Yes.
What do you think?
I don't know.
It's important in the film.
Yeah, of course it's important in the film. I mean, I have to say that...
Because you see it through the eyes of Rebecca.
Yeah.
And we empathize with her.
Yeah.
And we go with her. And we want to help. And we feel, how much power do I have? Am I really going to be able to heal? Or it's just all fake, and people will suffer anyway?
I suppose that's...
Go back. The forest will be destroyed.
Well,
There'll be no more climate.
I mean, I have to say the one thing that impacted me on this very first trip that I took to the Amazon, because all those elements actually are in the film, but one thing was that we paid a visit to sort of a cluster of missions, and it was very interesting because they weren't expecting us, because they're not registered as missionaries. They're registered as individual people living in that area. They're not allowed to mission, so it's very clandestine. But we arrived there, and we arrived at a German mission, and they were all hanging in hammocks, listening to sermons, actually. We sort of interrupted them, relaxing. And then they were gracious enough to offer us squeezed orange juice, squeezed by the indigenous people who were there to be missioned at their, it reminded me of something I had experienced as a kid in South Africa. I mean, it's just, no, but it was actually shocking in a certain way to think that this was happening. That was one aspect. Another aspect was that just traveling up the Trans-Amazonica Highway, if you would cross a river on one of these ferries where all the lorries and everything sort of are transported with, it was chaotic. There would be sort of people with a bicycle with 6 chainsaws. So if you think about it, no, it's just everybody in the area is somehow trying to survive, and everybody in the area, or everybody who's drawn to this region, the Amazon, obviously needs some kind of livelihood, and the Amazon seems to provide that for them. So it doesn't really seem like one could control it, because it's not that it's one corporation or anything, it's just happening, and it's chaotic in the way that it happens. So I think one feeling that I had very strongly when I came back was, this is not, how does one put an end to this?
I just wanted to ask you, because we didn't really talk about this, but about how did you cast everyone that you find in Brazil? Because I understand you came late to the process and you were brought in, but that means everybody else was already cast. We just wanted to make sure they were perfect for you, probably. But how did you cast all the local population? And I think it was probably a lot of actor, non-actor type of situation where people are mixed up, which makes sometimes shoots very difficult.
I would say that the minority are actually actors in the film. A lot of the people who populate the film are non-actors. So we worked with 3 different casting directors in Brazil. No, we had a very small budget. We worked with a very small budget. It was high energy, low budget. So yeah.
You need at least one of the 2.
We had both. We were privileged to have a low budget and high energy. No, so for example, there are the 2 Alves brothers. They came to us through I would say, I wouldn't call him a casting director, but someone who does a bit of casting in Rio. And then the little girl at the beginning, the young Rebecca, came through a woman who predominantly does children's castings. And this kid is actually, honestly, she's German and lives part of the year in Sao Paulo. And the parents received like a casting call, and her mother flew her back to Sao Paulo for the casting. And she just happened to be...
a Pierre Marais film.
It was
We can't miss
crazy.
that.
No, I didn't know, but it was like... It was amazing, because she was the one for us. But the main and very important person was a man called Claudio Barras, who is an actor, theater director based in Belém, who actually worked on films by Hector Babenco. Yeah. And he has a long history of working with indigenous people. And I was originally very skeptical for some reason, because I had the feeling, okay, we have to do things in a certain way. And I was very, very wrong, because Claudio Barras he was a gift to the film. And not only did he do the casting, he also did the workshops with the indigenous people. We have 3 different ethnicities. We have the Xavante people, Assurini, and Satere Marais and Tikuna. So we have 3 different nations participating in the film, and so it was a process because the idea was also to create, in order to not somehow be offensive, I'm not using the right word for it, but to any of the people participating in the film, the idea was to do a workshop with them and for them to create a fictional people or nation that would then be the ones depicted in the film. And so Claudio did a 2-week workshop, and we really brought people from different parts of the Amazon. And out of that workshop, I was able to find which ones would be, could be Silas or Gilvan, the sort of more important characters. And then Claudia was also actually there during the shoot, and that was very, very important and very helpful to me because I don't speak Portuguese, and I can obviously feel, I think I feel a performance, or I can feel moments, but it was very, very strange for the first time to really not understand the language. And with Claudio, it was really wonderful because it was like having, I don't know, a medium there to speak, to communicate, and he and I understood each other very well, and he was really, yeah, he was just a partner through the film. It was a luxury. I would love to have that happen again, but
You can make part 2.
part 2.
The New Forest Lab.
We have to speak to Sophie, the producer. She's very important to that process.
She's collecting funds outside. I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yes? Is there are there microphones? Yes, we do. Thank you. There's someone in red over there.
Hello, hi.
There's
Oh,
a
we have a
microphone
microphone.
coming.
I don't need it, but it's okay.
No, we can't
You
hear
should.
otherwise. Honestly, it's hard. It's hard
Hello.
up here. Yes, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, thank you, Jeremy and Pia. My name is Jordan Resnick, and I really value your film. And my question is that, especially with your performance as, what was your character's name? Can you please remind me?
Lawrence Byrne.
Lawrence Byrne. That there is this, there's almost con man quality to him where he comes in and he wants to turn the situation into his advantage. And then you start to slowly unwind and see that there is this real depth and caring to his character. And for you, Pia, as the director and writer, I'm really curious about the scene where the logger is admitting to himself through the conversation with Byrne and the daughter that he needs to embrace the love and the spirit to really let the healing through. So I'm curious for the 2 principal characters that they know that they're the vessels for this healing, that they're unable to get through it for their own selves.
Sorry, what was the question part?
Well, why is it the choice that it ends on a tragic note and this family can't, that your character, you can't open yourself up or himself to really to just say what's on his mind, to tell his daughter she's not his daughter, but she is his daughter,
Yeah.
and that there is this true love and caring, and that they couldn't get through with the romance either, that it
Yeah.
stops short where it needs to go the most.
Well, I mean, the way that I think about it, or the way it is that that I've created an entire fictional world in which we've all inhabited, and that there's a certain amount of power that by the virtue of belief of people around us in her abilities, that maintains this world. But it's all founded on a fundamental lie, right? And that fundamental lie risks destroying absolutely everything. And so that's part of the biggest impediment to being able to be honest on the most fundamental level about, and to be able to tell her, it's like, you're actually not my daughter, but I love you. And it's this, for me, that last moment is a confessional. It's the one confessional in which everything's been lost and everything's broken. And the risk is by telling this thing that it will absolutely dissolve, and I'll be left empty. And that is what happens for a while, right? You know, sort of after the conversation in the pickup truck I've gotten rid of the mission, I mean, or the chapel, and it's over. I'm on the couch. It's done. And so then the question is like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back. I'm going to try to, and then it opens up space for the relationship of what is true in the relationship to find a shape, and that shape that it finds is intrinsically wrapped up in what's happening in the world around us through her eyes, right? But I think it's this, for me, the entire time, it was the danger of destroying the thing that I believed was sustaining me and sustaining this whole thing, and that's why all of the fucked up decisions that I make throughout the film are made, is that fear. And a fundamental lack of an ability to truly see the harm that I'm bringing to the people that are around me. And I have to become aware. I slowly peel away that shell to find something that's true, that's really true.
But Jeremy, that's actually interesting, because as you say it, I actually never thought about it, but but Byrne at the end knows himself much less than she knows herself.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like Byrne is at a sort of not an infantile state, but is a newborn. He's born again, right? Or born for the first time. You know, I think that, and I think that there's the initial tragedy of having lost all of my family and everything that has meant to me, that's never actually processed and dealt with throughout the entire course of my life with her as she's growing up, because I've invested everything to keep away from that and think about the way that this place and God and fill us and then can be shared. But I require everybody to believe in this fiction, and that there's something that's abusive ultimately at the core of that, but it's also, and it's fear-based. But I think that by the end, it's the only moment that I start to learn who I am.
I think I was interested in this idea. I'd seen this wonderful documentary about Amy Winehouse by Asif Kapadia. I loved it so much, and there was this one moment, because she had a very peculiar relationship to her father, and there was this one moment, I think, where she was somewhere on some island with her friends recovering, and her father dragged her over to take photographs. And I really found that moment so moving, and it interested me so much. And I think at the time I was starting to think, okay, what is it with these parents who have children who act or perform in some way? And at that time, and I think through the whole time of working on the film, there was always this idea of conditional love versus what could unconditional love be. I mean, does it exist? I don't know, but what is it if it exists? And I think that was the thing why it was always so important to me, that the one central thing that one can believe, is that they love each other, because otherwise there is no shift into that other, whatever that love is, that connection. But I think it's like some kind of it must be some intrinsic trust, because it is an unforgivable lie, but at the same time, he has also somehow, this sounds very sick, loved her. Yeah. But is love always healthy? I don't know. Yeah. What is it?
Well, I always find it's really interesting that, when she claims Byrne as her relative, that she then she couches it with, for now, right? There's a probational period at this point. I mean, it's something that has to be built and worked on, and that trust is something that is not that there's love, but being family and what the family means and how that grows is something that will happen in relation. And that relation goes both ways, in which he has to lose power.
Thank you. I think we can take a final question. Yes, we can. I always have permission first.
Yes,
Is someone here?
yes. Yes,
Yeah,
Where is the mic? Okay.
you do, because I'm half deaf.
and I'm the other half deaf.
No, I'm just half deaf.
Ooh, that's loud. I may have perceived the movie differently than this conversation is geared. But to me, and no offense to you, but to me, the main character seemed secondary to the mast of the story, which seemed to be about the indigenous people and the colonization of indigenous land, as well as the assimilation of indigenous people and what they believe from someone that comes from somewhere else with completely different experiences. And this was touched upon a little bit in the movie when he had talked about, it was during when, I don't remember any of the names, but he said to you, he said, well, your character, he said,
Said it to me.
yeah, but I know why I'm here. I'm here for money and business, but you're here for their souls. And I was really disappointed that the movie didn't really discuss that anymore. I think I kind of interpreted the end to maybe say that as, well, actually no, because it didn't discuss what he kind of said to you. And to me, I just didn't really see, I kind of saw that woman being not your daughter from a mile away. Like, it wasn't really a completely shocking thing. But I think that the conversation is kind of geared to something completely different, where the movie itself seemed like the mast wasn't what we're talking about. So I was kind of confused about that and why, and what that quote really meant, because it was such a strong quote, but then there was nothing else to support it afterwards.
You agree? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have to say one thing, that I understand where you're coming, and thank you. I, though, perceive myself as my only perspective on the story could only be the one of Rebecca, the main character, Rebecca, the young girl. I felt I couldn't take another perspective, and I wouldn't have wanted to, because I feel that that perspective, that other one, has to come from someone else. And so for me, that was very important. She's 16. Yeah. But anyway, let me finish. So that was very important to me making the film, to not assume a perspective that I couldn't inhabit, and I could inhabit hers. What he says at the end is, I went for the wood and the money, and you went for the souls. So he's the sawmill owner. And in a way, for me, the one thing that I came back from my first trip with, because it really left an imprint on me, was that these evangelical churches, because wherever I went, down the Trans-Amazonica highway, there were like these churches everywhere, like in garages, in little houses, in any kind of place. And I had the feeling, like what I came back with was, these churches are kind of amplifying the destruction, because they're preaching prosperity to these people, and these people are desperate. And it is ambiguous, because you can't really say to someone who has nothing, you can't cut that tree because it's not environmental, we need that tree. You know, one can't make that judgment. And I can't make that judgment. I don't want to make that judgment. I was interested in the ambiguity that I discovered, that I couldn't say, oh, it's this or that or whatever. It just felt like life in all its forms was sort of occupying more and more this sort of forest and devouring it. And so for me, this statement, it does make sense. It does make sense from the perspective of the two characters. And I felt that it was true, and it is a big statement, but I felt it needed to also be said.
Can the point is very well taken. The way that I read it, sort of reading the script and sort of being in it, I started to understand Byrne, that the entire operation of Byrne, of creating a fiction and forcing everybody to live that fiction, is ultimately at its core is the colonial endeavor, right? And so that my entire character is a representation, is a manifestation of a colonial thinking, that where there's a wound at the middle in which everybody else has to satisfy that wound, while using language saying that it is I'm doing everything altruistically. I'm doing something for you. But whereas in fact it's entirely self-serving, and each and every move that's made is self-serving. Whether it's about the soul, whether it's about God and religion and being able to impose this belief system or not, I see it as an entirely egotistical falsehood, right? That either leads to or is complicit in all of the destruction that's happening around it. And the purpose not being, that Eilidish's purpose is very clear. The destruction is to become rich. My purpose, or Byrne's purpose, is to maintain a sort of space around this wounded place that can't be healed, right? And that there's something that is duplicitous and blind at the core of it. Whether it's delved into in terms of religious terms or not, I hear your point, or whether it's or that it's gone into in other sort of if there's another way of sort of unfolding those themes, I see it that it's for me is really wrapped up in the entire operation, the way in which my character, the way that Byrne has established a life and a mission in this place, and everybody serves him at some fundamental level, while lying that he's serving them.
I mean, and it's definitely a very rich movie, because there's a lot to discuss in each individual part that you're bringing together. But anyway, we do have to wrap up. But thank you so much for being here and talking about the film. You have a screening tomorrow also for additional discussion. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.